afternoon with a southerly change, 14 degrees. Christchurch mainly fine, a few showers from afternoon. Sou'westers and 11, and Dunedin sleety showers, less frequent in the afternoon and clearing this evening. A high of 8 today. It's 11 minutes past 7.
And it's Morning Report. We start with trade and the announcement that New Zealand has won the right to hold free trade talks with the world's biggest trading bloc, the European Union. The EU overnight approving beginning negotiations with both New Zealand and Australia. Speaking in Brussels a few hours ago, the European Trade Commissioner, Cecilia Malmström, welcomed the chance to negotiate with important friends and allies.
I will be travelling to Australia and New Zealand in mid-June to formally launch the negotiations, and then the actual technical team will meet shortly after that so that we can start these negotiations just before the summer. This sends, of course, a strong signal reaffirming our commitment to open trade and reinforcing our ambitious trade agenda.
Well, let's go to the Trade Minister, David Parker, who is with us now. Good morning, Minister.
Good morning.
How confident are you that you can strike a deal that sees tariff-free, or as close as you could get to that, for agricultural goods into the EU?
I don't think we'll achieve free tariff access across all categories of export to the European Union. But we'll see substantial improvements. The estimated increase, according to the European Union's analysis some time ago, or about a year ago, I think, was that New Zealand's exports to the European Union would increase by about between 10 and 22% over time. And of course, not only would the volume increase, but the proportion of the sale price that came back into the pockets of the New Zealanders selling goods and services into Europe would increase because there'd be lower tariffs.
And so that would be for butter, mainly for our dairy products, those increases would be?
No, not just that. We'll have improved trade access for some of the innovative things that we're trying to develop in New Zealand as we sort of are on this journey from volume to value. So we think that there will be benefits across the board.
It's modest in terms of its economic impact, though, isn't it? They're saying in the analysis you quote between 0.3 and 0.5% of GDP is a boost to New Zealand, so at best 0.5% of GDP.
$1 to $2 billion additional exports every year is not to be sniffed at.
No, but I'm just putting it in context. This will be an economy shortly of $300 billion GDP. It sits around, $275 billion at the moment, so it's less than 0.5% of GDP.
I don't take many steps that have a consequence of billions of dollars of increased income for the country, so no, I don't agree with that. I think it's quite significant.
Okay. What about some things coming the other way? Would you expect this to include increased foreign investment from the EU countries into New Zealand?
It could do. We've already got pretty free rules about inward foreign direct investment. Of course, the rules that we're introducing at the moment, banning foreign buyers of our homes and tightening up on farm sales, also apply to them. So whilst it could, if we've got more trade flows, you'd expect some more investment flows, both going in both directions. I don't think there would be a dramatic change there.
Would you be willing to look at having a level under which there would be no scrutiny from the overseas investment office for buying New Zealand assets or land from the EU? Outside
of farms and residential property, yes, that's one of the things I think would be negotiated.
Okay, so it would become easier at a certain threshold, and this would go, possibly into the tens of millions, for EU companies to buy New Zealand assets?
That could be an outcome, but you need to realise that in respect of those sorts of investments at the moment, the only two tests that apply are an anti-corruption test and a financial suitability test in any event. So, they've got strong rules against corruption in their own country, so I'm not too worried about that.
Pharmaceuticals. When I look at the EU impact assessment that you were talking about, they talk about medicines, and I wonder what impact this could have. They say that EU businesses advocate for strong intellectual property right provisions and, quote, patent term extensions for pharmaceuticals and improved mechanisms for preventing infringements of generic medicines. So do we run into this issue that was raised during the TPP negotiations, that if countries, and I'm thinking of some of those countries in Europe who do produce medicines and want term extensions for pharmaceuticals, is that up for grabs in this agreement?
Well, we'll always protect the Pharmac model. I don't think we'll have to agree any significant changes to our patent system. Our patent system already properly protects the intellectual property in patent medicines, and Pharmac allows us to move to generic versions of those that are less expensive at the end of the patent period, and I don't see that changing.
If I look at the impact on consumers in New Zealand, the MFAT website claims there will be lower costs for Kiwi consumers. The EU impact assessment says, quote, for New Zealand, consumer prices would increase negligibly. Would increase.
Negligibly.
Yeah, increase.
Negligibly. Yeah, look, I can't see how prices to New Zealand consumers would increase as a consequence of this, unless it's because over time we become a stronger economy, and that those prices, that strength flows through to higher wages, which does increase prices over time. So I suppose there could be an effect in that way. But I think we've got an enormous trade agenda on now in the face of this rising protectionism around the world. We've put some more money in the budget this year to employ some more people at MFAT to help us in this task, and I actually think this is a really good news story for New Zealand.
Hang on, you need to employ more people over and above the allocation of $900 million odd in the budget?
No, included in that. Most of that was going to ODA, okay. but there is a significant amount to...
The $200 million for diplomats.
Or 150, I think it is, including, roughly.
Okay, I want to look at the sequencing just finally, and then get some dates off you before we leave it. What about, does this have any impact on the China Free Trade Agreement upgrades? They've got the most favoured nation status, which I guess means we kind of have to give them whatever we give the EU, right? So does this impact on that?
No. You're right that there's a most favoured nation clause in respect of the China Free Trade Agreement, in respect of investment protocols, not goods and services, I think, in the main. So if we were to do a better deal with the European Union, or a more permissive deal, better for the European Union than we have in China, that would flow through to the China agreement. But we'll be doing very, very well to get as good a high-quality agreement with the European Union as we've got with China, which ranks as one of our better free trade agreements in the world.
When do you hope to wrap this up? What's the aim?
It's always hard to tell how long these things will take. We've had agreements that sort of dribble on forever and are never concluded. I'm reasonably hopeful that, given that we've got a clear mandate from the European Union and they're keen, because we share so many values in terms of multilateralism, respect for human rights, high-wage economy, environmentalism, I'm hopeful we can wrap it up in a couple of years.
All right. We'll wrap this one up now.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Minister David
Bye-bye.
Parker. 19 minutes past 7.
US President Donald Trump has said an historic summit with